Program is all about providing. Hello. Hello, and welcome to the Strategic Alignment Podcast. This program is all about providing leaders and managers with meaningful insights on how to optimize business results by aligning their people strategy to their business strategy. Our goal is to support you as you rise to the challenges of complex decision-making centered around attracting and retaining top talent.
Hello, welcome everybody to another Strategic Alignment Podcast, and we're in for an exciting conversation today. With me, Shauna K. Pottinger. I don't know if she hear me calling the last name Pottinger. So we're in for an exciting conversation. And for the last few weeks, we haven't been on because a number of things have been happening in the background. But we're so excited to be back with you as we talk about life, as we talk about growth and leadership, and we talk about how do you operate in the workspace, and especially as we celebrate Black History Month, we're touching a topic that can be sensitive for some, but it's meaningful for everybody. And we'll be talking about unconscious bias today. And Sean, the first thing I'm going to share is that, most time when we think about growth, when we think about leadership, when we think about those things, we the first thing that we think about, it has to do with team, it has to do with environment, it has to do with strategies. But very seldomly we talk about the impact of unconscious biases and what happens to people who experience that in the workforce. How does that impact growth? How does that impact leadership and team dynamics? So before going further, like for you to tell us a little bit about unconscious biases and what that means to you. When you hear that, what comes across your mind?
I just want to pause quickly to just affirm the fact that you have chosen to go with this topic because it's Black History Month. And of course, I'm sure many of the individuals who are on here listening today are able to relate to this subject matter because majority of our clients and the people that we relate to tend to fall into those categories where they're either impacted by or have perpetuated unconscious bias. Why is that the case? Because our biases is natural to our humanity. So everyone, either in some way, shape, or form, you've either perpetuated bias or you've been a victim of it in some way, shape, or form. And so I think this is a very important topic to talk about, even if you're going to touch on the whole matter of growth and development. There are so many individuals who would have been such great assets to organizations, but because of someone's unconscious bias, because that person was not managing their biases, this individual would have left and not been able to create the kind of impact. And so I do believe this is a very important subject. And so I'm very happy that you chose to go that route for the first episode in the Black History Month.
So my question to you, as you made mention that, Shauna, is that why is it important? Because sometimes people may say that I've never been treated unfairly. I don't know what you're talking about. Why is it that we need to know about this? Why is it such an important thing that even if you're in that space where you're thinking that you've not been a victim or you're not somebody who has perpetuated that thing when it comes on to biases, why is it such an important thing for you to still be aware when it comes on to unconscious biases and preferences and stuff like that? Why is that such an important thing for leaders and those who are not just leaders, but those who are being led?
Because maybe, Jamie, if you have not been the victim of it, you possibly are perpetuating it, right? But let's just take it back a little bit and talk about what unconscious biases are. There's a word that I've often heard being thrown around that has basically, for me, captured the essence of our biases. And it has to do with our preferences. When we talk about unconscious bias, most times people look at it as overt racism, where you are being refused or denied certain liberties just because of your race, or we hear about all the isms, the sexism, the favoritism, and all of those things. But the truth of it is, biases and unconscious bias really centers around our preferences. These are deeply held preferences that we've developed over time And this come as a direct result of our experiences. What our experiences have taught us is, based on how I'm oriented, this is what is right, this is what is truth, this is what is safe. Anything outside of that is abnormal. And so our response and reaction to those things normally is manifested in certain behaviors and decision making that is tied directly to those preferences. What am I talking about? For example, our natural instincts tells us that on a hot summer's day, the right kind of apparel, the truth and the preference in terms of what to wear should actually be something cool, something that's like a sleeveless, or something that will not cause you to sweat a lot. And so if you're in church, for example, Jamie, and you see a man show up in a trench coat, full black, dressed from head to toe, hats, gloves, everything. Well, first of all, you're going to look at this person strange, and you're going to be like, that's not normal for the situation in which we're in. Mm-hmm. And so the way that you would choose to respond would be, it could possibly trigger some innate tendencies that we have as part of our fight or flight mechanisms that would say, this is not normal. So guess what? Send the security to go profile this guy. Let them go and check him out and see what's his deal. Why is he here with this long bag in a trench coat and just looking like he's about to be an active shooter, right? And so the truth is, that's why God made us with these biases, because they help us as part of our survival system. However, they also can serve to be damaging.
So what I'm hearing you to say then, Sean, is that once you have been socialized, once you have been nurtured, and once you have been cultured, or once you have had any form of experience, you will find yourself in a place where there's certain things that you prefer. And there's certain things that you place certain labels on based on where you're coming from.
Right.
So when you think about leadership, and when you think about growth, when you think about dealing with people, it's of utmost importance that you pay attention to what are those things that you enjoy. What are those things that you consider to be true? Because as you made mention, the things that you consider to be true may serve to put you in a different place in terms of others, whereby now you're seeing them as being at fault, or seeing them as being as out of place. Or
that's correct.
And once you see that, whatever you see and what you feel will impact the way you make your decisions.
And I'm happy that you brought it up, because really what we're trying to get at is to not paint unconscious bias as the plague, which is to be avoided. It really is something that needs to be managed. And so if you look at it from that perspective, where this is a natural part of who I am, and you own that. Remember, you always talk about awareness. Once you have that awareness, you're able now to manage it. One of the sessions that we lead out as part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion program really is called Mind Your Blind Spot. And I think there could not be a more appropriate way to label unconscious bias, because really what happens is, when you're not aware of the fact that you're operating based on these implicit and unconscious biases, what ends up happening is that those individuals who are sitting in those spaces, usually the word blind spots is normally synonymous with a truck driver, mm-hmm. and them not being able to see the damage that they can possibly do that sits in their blind spot. And I think that's the very same thing that happens to leaders, to those individuals who are in position of power, that can impact based on their decision making, based on their interactions with their direct reports, that they are actually hurting people who are sitting in their blind spots.
I think as you made mention of that, Sean, I think what is also important is that what you compound or unconscious bias is when we find ourselves in certain position where there are other persons who share similar blind spots to what we share. So what happens is that when you're celebrated, when your blind spots are being celebrated, it now becomes a norm. So not only does it become a norm, but it now becomes normal for others to expect and anticipate certain treatment. And that leads me to ask the next question, is that how does it impact growth? How does it impact advancement? How does it impact stability in any given organization or any given relationship? How does that impact those things?
I'm happy that you brought that up, because unconscious bias really affects people on the individual and the business level. I'm going to take it from the individual level and show you just how it works. There's this thing called in-group and out-group group bias that, to me, is one of the biggest factors that impact individual growth, promotions within the workplace. I'll tell you how this happens. Let's say, for example, I'm just going to use this example. A lot of companies, in a lot of offices, people tend to want to go out drinking on a Thursday or a Friday, right? A Friday evening. And as these groups get together and they start to form, they're unfamiliar, but this opportunity presents, the chance for you and I to network outside of work, so I can get to know you on a personal level. And what that does is it deepens the intimacy between you and I, and intimacy not in a relationship, a romantic relationship kind of way. I'm talking about, let's say, for example, you're the manager and I'm a direct report. There are 5 of us on the team, but 3 of us always go out for drinks or go out to eat dinner or whatever we're going to do to just lime and chill. That right there is forming the very base of an in-group. Because what happens is, as you hang out and you tend to network and you become familiar with each other, this spills over into the job. And where the unconscious bias comes in is where those individuals who find themselves as part of that in-group are now considered to be nothing they do can be that is wrong is considered wrong. It's actually explained as if it's done because I know you, right? Or when they do something right, it's blown up, wow, this guy is cool or what have you. It also gives proximity because in a workspace, some individuals may not necessarily get the opportunity to show just how smart they are. And so when they go out for drinks and they're able to share on different topics and so on, it sort of expands the view that you have of that person. Now, how is this impacting the way that you relate to this person versus the other individuals in your organization or your office or your department that do not get an opportunity to come out with you for drinks? What eventually happens, Jamie, is that person is going to feel excluded. And whenever that happens, that's when you have the issue of unconscious bias coming into play, because it really comes down to not necessarily who you include, but who you exclude as a result of your biases.
And that's important. I like the way you said that. It's not just who you include, but who you exclude. Because most times what we use to include people is others is based on something that we like or we prefer. So once what you like and prefer is allowing you to include some folks, it means that the things that you don't like or prefer will automatically allow you to exclude others. And my question is, how does this impact growth? How does this impact results when it comes on to, because not because you go out with certain people and have a drink, and not because these people are doing things that you're accustomed to be understanding as being normal, means that these people are the people with the skill set to get certain things done. How does this mindset, when it comes down to unconscious biases, impact the level of growth and success that a team or an organization or a coach experience when they make decisions based on those preferences?
Well, we just talked about some of the personal and individual impact that it has, where for example, I don't drink for religious purposes. And so when you guys are going out to drink at the bar, I'm not going to come. So if I'm a part of that team, automatically I feel excluded, because whenever you guys are cracking jokes around the office about something that somebody did, it's almost like I feel like I'm an outsider to the conversation. I'm like just on the outside, just peering in on what's going on. So that's just one way in terms of the personal impact, because the team dynamics is then impacted. But think of this individual who's not included, Jamie, who very well could have been an excellent player on your team. What ends up happening there is it could possibly result in disengagement. And you and I know that the research has proven that disengagement has cost company billions of dollars, where people are just engaged in presentism. You show up for work, but you're not present. It's like you're there, but you are not necessarily getting the work done. You're not going above and beyond to produce good work. So that's a one factor. Actively disengaged employees, or they may just leave, and so your rate of turnover is impacted there. And a number of factors as far as the business implications. So you're talking about the loss of great talent because you're not necessarily managing your biases as well as you should. And so from a business perspective, you can be negatively impacted there.
So what I'm hearing is that when as leaders or just regular people, when we operate from that standpoint with our unconscious biases, we automatically prevent ourselves from receiving the discretionary value from others.
Yes.
And then people who will not value them, they will not value your vision. They'll not value all those things, and that will negatively impact the level of growth. That's beautiful. But my next question, Shauna, is that do we all have biases? Because sometimes we put ourselves on this pedestal, like, I don't have biases, I don't have certain preferences, and if I do, how do I work on those things? For those of us who think we don't, I'd like for you to answer that. And for those of us who know we do, how do we work on those things? How do we get around that? Like you're sharing now, I'm thinking about some things, and I'm like, dang, those are something that I hold dear to me. And people who don't operate in that way, I kind of look at them a different way, as opposed to those who do things the way I think they should be doing it. How do I address that? How do I address that as an individual, now that I know that those biases will impact growth? It will impact my team, my decision making. It will impact the level that others give to the team when they believe that I'm not a part of this vision. I'm just here to take up a warm seat and get paid because these folks don't really value me. How do I address that?
I think it has to be addressed on an individual and a systemic level. The truth of it is that our biases individually is something that we have to be open and honest with ourselves about. Why am I making the choice to go with Jamie in this scenario? Am I basing my decision solely on the fact that Jamie is the best person for the job? Or am I doing it based on familiarity? And that's a question that we have to answer honestly and openly. Like, is it the reason for my decision coming down to the fact that, well, I listen to Jamie and he speaks well, and I think he would be a great I think he would be a great candidate for this job. Or am I basing my decision on this promotion on the fact that, based on his resume, based on his experience, and based on the behavioral factors that are required for this job, I think that Jamie is the best person for the job? And so it's very important for us to create that safe space as well, Jamie, for our team members to call us on stuff. Like, remember we talked about feedback a couple of weeks ago. Are we inviting feedback from our team members to say, whenever you see me engaged in behavior that you believe is biased, I want to know. I want you to come to me and say that to me. And create that safe space so that individuals can come and share that kind of feedback without pushback. Another important factor too, Jamie, I think from a systemic standpoint, organizations need to put things in place to make sure that there are objective methods and structures in place when it comes on to promotion, when it comes on to performance review, when it comes on to their hiring practice, and discipline. You have to be able to separate the gut, intuition, emotion, and those feelings from it, because once you go to that natural humanity, it's going to, the biases will definitely have an impact. And we talked about it earlier that no matter how you try to deny the fact, it is just as much as we breathe, bias is as human to us as the way we breathe.
As you say that, Shauna, and I'm talking to leaders out there, and when we say leadership, we talk about leading up, leading down, leading across, and most important, leading yourself. And I don't know, at some point we're having a conversation once, or maybe I was reading something, one of those books that you're always recommending for me to read. And there was something about doing an inventory, a personal inventory. And when doing that, what happens is that listing all your preferences, and not only listing your preferences, but having that open dialogue with people around you who are part of your team or people who you're leading, and ask them what are some of the things that they prefer. And then when you look at what their preferences are, you find out that these preferences that they have may be the very thing that forced me to not wanting to align myself with them, or being able to see the value that they have to offer. And you spoke earlier about awareness. So when you are aware of all your preferences, the things that you enjoy, and sometimes when you think about the things that you enjoy, all you see is the fact that the impact that it has on your life, not understanding the impact that it has on others based on how you view that. So what is it that you like to share with the average leader out there, or the average person in a relationship? Because biases affect anything that has to do with others. Because once you were exposed to a culture, once you were socialized, once you were nurtured, you have some amount of biases. Once you've experienced challenges or failures, those things shape the way you think or the way you do things. And sometimes our biases can even hold us back individually. And I know even this conversation, we talked a lot about how it impacts others, but it also impacts our own growth.
Right.
So what is it that you like to share with those who are listening in terms of what are some of the immediate steps that they can take at this point that will allow them to address their personal biases, and even if they don't know that they have it, what is that they could take away from this conversation?
Well, as far as takeaways from the conversation, I'm hoping that you would have been able to glean from the conversation that it's not a bad thing to have biases, but it is a bad thing to not manage it appropriately. And so, as far as moving forward, one of the practical takeaways that I would encourage everyone on here, if you're on the chat and you want to join the conversation, I'm going to invite you to go ahead and comment, but and ask your questions. But what I want to also say to you is there is a very useful scientific tool that was developed by the Harvard University. And this tool actually helps you to gauge your implicit biases. It's an implicit bias test. So I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and take that test. That's a very important place to start, right? In addition to acknowledging the fact that we all hold these biases, I want us to also recognize and understand that your bias is unplugged.